President Trump threatening to shut down the border with Mexico next week if the southern ally doesn't stop the flow of migrants. In Texas, border officials say they have been forced to release some people because they are running out of space to house them. CBP says it apprehended more than 130,000 adults and children so far this year, and that's a 338% increase from all of 2018. Let's bring in Democratic Congresswoman Donna Shalala of Florida, a former Health and Human Services Secretary, and it's so good to have you here on the program. I did want to read one thing to you from Secretary Nielsen's letter. She says that HHS is taking steps to rapidly add thousands of shelter beds, but the short-term HHS is approaching its maximum capacity and will very likely require thousands of additional beds in the coming weeks and months. A potential overflow of children in DHS custody represents our most acute humanitarian risk. And I wonder, from your perspective, Congresswoman, is there a way to get DHS the help that she's asking for?
Well, first of all, she needs to obey the law, and that is we have to have due process for each of these people that are coming to the border. These are mothers and kids that are escaping terrible situations. We already gave DHS more judges. They haven't filled those positions. They haven't filled the positions of the Border Patrol agents. They have thousands of positions they simply have not filled.
Okay,
so they need to do their job.
Here right now,
if they need more money for humanitarian purposes, they need to make the request. The administration, we've gotten a letter from her, but we have no request for that money. And if you look at the president's budget, he hardly is reflecting what she has described as a crisis
well, one of the things
border.
she says that they need is a change in the asylum laws. I think she would dispute that it's just women and children, though of course there are women and children that are coming across as well, but that there is a need to change the asylum laws because I just think everyone should be able to agree 100,000 people in 1 month is an impossible number to keep up with.
It is not. We don't need to change the asylum laws. We need to process people with due process. Her idea of changing the asylum laws is to ignore due process. And in this country, we believe that people who apply for asylum ought to have due process. Can we handle 100,000 people? If we weren't slow walking the people that are currently in detention, of course we could handle them. There are 1,500 kids in Florida in a detention center, and they should have been placed long before now. They're taking too much time to place them in families.
So
when
do you
I
think
ran
she's
the Office
not
of
doing
Refugee,
do you think that she's being negligent in her duties?
I don't think that they're managing this very well, and they've created the crisis themselves. By not moving people who have applied for asylum quickly through the process,
you don't think
and by not hiring the appropriate number of Border Patrol.
You don't think that they've just been overwhelmed, though, by the numbers?
Of course they have, because they created, with the kind of xenophobic policies that they've had, they've created part of this problem. Remember, this country has made investments in the past in the countries these people are coming from to increase the quality of law enforcement. That money has not been transferred to those countries. We need to stabilize El Salvador, Honduras, so that people aren't leaving there and don't feel that they're
I'm all for
coming
solving the problem at its source, but I think that these governments have been unable or unwilling to do so. We'll leave that there, and I wanted to ask you about the other issue that, of course, you're well versed in, and that is this idea of trying to basically undo Obamacare through the court system that President Trump has suggested through his Justice Department. But I'm wondering, is there a way that Republicans and Democrats could get together now that the Democrats are in the majority in the House to get something done comprehensively before this court would rule?
Well, first of all, Obamacare, the whole concept of the Affordable Care Act, is a Republican idea. It came out of the Heritage Foundation. If the Republicans have another idea, and the president has challenged them to cover pre-existing conditions, but to do it at a lower cost, they've been trying to do that for years and they haven't been able to. They should work with us to make sure the Affordable Care Act covers everyone that needs to be covered at an affordable price, and that includes working with us on reducing the cost of pharmaceuticals.
I think you could probably get an agreement on that part. I do want to ask you one thing, though, because things have changed a little bit, even since you were HHS Secretary. Just in 2017, 51% of Democrats said that they wanted to improve the Affordable Care Act, but now 49% say they want to go for Medicare for all. Have you made a decision on where you stand on that?
I'm for universal health care, but I believe that step one is improving the Affordable Care Act. We can do that efficiently at an absolutely affordable price. And many people that have it are enjoying it. In my district, there are 100,000 people that have the Affordable Care Act. Mm-hmm. They do not want to lose it, mm-hmm. nor does anyone that has good private health insurance. So the first thing we must do is to protect the Affordable Care Act and to get other states to extend Medicaid, because that's the most efficient way of getting mm-hmm. people covered who can't currently afford private health insurance.
You're right. Congresswoman Donna Shalala, we appreciate your point of view, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Paul, how is the president setting the table for the 2020 re-election cycle?
Well, you heard it perfectly last night at that event, Harris. What is he doing? First of all, on the Mueller investigation, he's targeting people like Jerry Nadler, the head of the House Judiciary Committee, Adam Schiff, the chair of the Intelligence Committee, the mainstream media. Why? Because these are the people who can continue the investigations from the Mueller report and other investigations as well. So he's trying to discredit these people as these investigations outside of the Mueller report continue on. Politically, Harris, yeah, it's all about 2020. He is obviously feeding the base. The base enjoys this. He wants to make sure his base is with him 100% in 2020. He needs them to win re-election. The question, though, is will these kind of comments, will this kind of rhetoric play with the moderates, the independents in the middle? He needs those people, especially the ones that voted for him in 2016, that got him in the White House. He needs them again in 20. We'll see if this kind of language plays with them.
You know, we often talk about a split in either political party, but is it fair to say that there could be one coming and it could be a wide divide among Democrats? You've got the people who've been in office for decades, like House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She sees what you just said. And so she's trying to turn the wheel, rolled out a health care plan this week from Democrats, that sort of thing. Where can they go now in terms of those 2020 White House hopefuls? With the president setting the agenda, what do you do?
Yeah, and you heard his language. How does he describe these 2020 contenders now? Well, he's been calling them socialists for a while. Now the new words, extremists. So he's trying to paint them as too far to the left and too dangerous for the mainstream public. That message is directed more at the middle, at the moderates and the independents who are going to be voting in 2020 in the general election. So you're going to hear this language continuously, Harris, from the president, from the Republican National Committee, and other pro-Republican groups trying to paint most of these Democrats who are supporting things like Medicare for All and Green New Deal as extremists and alarmists. You're going to hear that language over and over, Harris.
You know, I don't want to miss the point, because the president is on the ground now in Florida. He took Marine One from West Palm Beach, where he was at Mar-a-Lago, and now he is in an area, so we've been told, called Canal Point. It's separated about 40 miles with sugarcane and a lot of farmland from where he was in Mar-a-Lago. And the reason I bring that up is because it's a farming community where a lot of the people are living below the poverty line. The president shining a light on some of those who could use a boost, and also magnifying the fact that where you're seeing economic numbers go up for wage increases, it's among the low and middle class. We learned that today in statistics.
Yeah, no, good points, good points. And also he needs to shore up his base with farmers as well. Those tariffs that he's been pushing have not been helping a lot of farmers. He needs them in his camp in 2020. Another reason why you're seeing him doing what he's doing today, Harris.
All right, these are live pictures. Paul, they are to the right of your shoulder now. The President of the United States is looking at Lake Okeechobee and an earthen dam, a Herbert Hoover earthen dam that they built after a huge hurricane in 1928 that blew over the lake's banks and killed many people. It's a disaster that would forever haunt that region. And he's taking a look at that and touting his administration's progress in terms of making things better where they are. And you see Governor DeSantis with him. We also know that Senator Marco Rubio is with him. This is really an interesting turn of events, because this is exactly where Democrats said they wanted to be, infrastructure.
Infrastructure. It's the one area where Democrats and the president thought they could work together and get something done. It hasn't happened, obviously, in Congress. There's been a big difference of opinion between what both sides are pushing. The location, of course, Harris, so important. Florida, Florida, Florida. The biggest and most important probably of all the battleground states in the 2020 presidential election.
So what does this do for the conversation? Because we know, and you see as well, Senator Rick Scott in the blue shirt following the president there. So you've got some of the leadership on the ground, the top leadership in Florida with the president of the United States, taking a look at something that has been, you know, in terms of ecology, a challenge in Florida, and the president understanding the money that needs to be spent. Democrats, on the other hand, are saying you're not spending enough for the Everglades. I'm just curious, what does this do for that political battleground states conversation going forward to 2020?
Well, this event today and this trip by the president can only help him as he tries to keep Florida in his camp. And you talked about the leadership who's with him. Remember, the Democrats had a big 2018 in the House side, but in Florida, it's the Republicans that came out on top in some real squeaker elections. So the president's got a lot of allies, a lot of friends in high places in Florida. That's going to help him going forward to make sure he tries to keep that state and all those electoral votes that are up for grabs in Florida on his side, Harris.
Paul, real quickly, we've been a week now since AG, the Attorney General, did that 4-page summary of, now we know, some 300-plus pages of the Mueller report. Where would you put politics right now going forward as we enter the weekend?
You know, it's interesting. Some Democratic presidential contenders are saying actually the findings and how they were interpreted by the Attorney General may actually help the Democrats in the presidential election rather than hurt them. You know, now they're not going to rely on the Mueller report. They're not going to rely on the possibility of impeachment. They're going to take the president on maybe on the issues. And maybe that's the best way for them to do it. They had big success in 2018 talking about health care. That's what they need to concentrate on rather than maybe the Mueller report.
You might want to tell that to Congresswoman Tlaib and Congressman Al Green as they put forth that House resolution on impeaching the president this week. Paul, thank you very much for being with me during that breaking news.